Mina Aissatou Smile Sise, and this is the program Talk to the Camera. Today we can have a conference concerning the launching of the anti-corruption strategy for 2019 to 2023. And we go inside the Miata conference hall now. Outside the launching they take place as His Excellency the Vice President, Dr. Mohamed Juldeh Jalloh, they can do the launching.
Dr. Juldeh Mohamed Jalloh. Thank you. Please be seated. To kick off the launch of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy 2019-2023, I'd like to invite to the podium Director Patrick Sandy to give us the welcome statement.
Thank you, Madam Murray, Public Relations Officer, Anti-Corruption Commission, sir. His Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, Dr. Mohamed Juldeh Jalloh, Honorable Chief Minister, Professor David Francis, members of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps, Cabinet Ministers, the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner of the Anti-Corruption Commission, Sierra Leone, members of Parliament present, members of the Judiciary, staff of the Anti-Corruption Commission, civil society, the Fourth Estate, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure this morning to welcome you to the launch of the fourth generation National Anti-Corruption Strategy, what I will call the New Direction Corruption Battle Plan for the next 5 years. Indeed, the war against corruption declared by His Excellency retired Brigadier Julius Maada has begun. We welcome you all to that war by the launch of the next 5-year National Anti-Corruption Strategy. Your presence, all of you here today, shows that you attach as much importance as the President does to the fight against corruption and to the role of good governance in ensuring inclusive development in Sierra Leone. I would like to particularly welcome our outstanding Vice President, the Chief Minister, our development partners, and as a matter of fact, all of you to this epoch-making event. All of you have distinguished yourself through your support, advocacy of policies to strengthen transparency, accountability, and probity in our governance architecture. We heartily welcome you and are privileged also to recognize in absentia our younger compatriots, the school-going pupils, upon whose shoulders and in whose interest we must ensure that the burden and cancer of corruption is not allowed to frustrate their future. We will fight to prevent that, and that fight, Mr. Vice President, has begun, and we are winning. His Excellency, sir, Sierra Leone is a signatory to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. In 2003, we signed the convention, and in 2004 was ratified. By so doing, we have obliged ourselves to adopt and implement policies that prevent and penalize corruption. Article 5.1 makes mandatory that each state party shall, in accordance with the fundamental principle of its legal system, develop and implement or maintain effective coordinated anti-corruption policies that promote the participation of society and reflect the principles of the rule of law. Corruption hits the poor the hardest. Why is this fight important? We all know that rampant corruption hinders development. Public resources are diverted to the pockets of corrupt individuals from needed investments in transport, energy, health, and education. petty corruption, such as service providers asking for bribes or simply not reporting to work, should not be tolerated. Corruption especially harms the poor. They are the ones most in need of the public goods and services, but they cannot obtain those services just because they cannot pay a bribe. This new direction national anti-corruption strategy provides the framework to confront this scourge. His Excellency the Vice President, Honorable Chief Minister, Cabinet Ministers, Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the launch of this strategy. Let me with pride state that even in this very short period of your call to arms against this cancer, the fearless Commissioner, Francis Ben Kaifala, and all staff members for the vigilance and dedication to the fight against corruption. We thank them and salute them. At the same time, we recognize that we can do more. I call on all staff members to renew our focus on governance as a driver of change and of sustainable development. When we act together, we can make a difference in this fight against corruption for the lasting benefit of the people of Sierra Leone. Ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's with immense pleasure that I introduce the chairman of this August occasion, who is no less a pressing, but Honorable Professor Dr. David John Francis, the Chief Minister of the Republic of Sierra Leone.
Your Excellency, please permit me to stand on existing protocols. And let me start with a rejoinder. Thank you very much for that very, very, very long introduction. For a moment, I thought you were introducing someone else. I just want to make a clarification. I don't hold a master's degree. That must have been a mistake. But that is the problem when you put a very long, glorious, flattering introduction. I hold a first degree from the very proud University of Sierra Leone and a doctoral degree from Southampton University. One of the few who have just 2 degrees and have made it to professorial level in the United Kingdom. So I'm very proud of that. Good morning and welcome. But let me start off by reminding all of us why we are here today. By reminding us about the statement made by His Excellency the President, retired Brigadier Dr. Julius Maada Bio, during the launch of the Governance Transition Team report in June 2018. His Excellency President Bio unequivocally stated, corruption is a threat to our development. Corruption is a national security threat. Corruption is an existential threat to the survival of this country. Therefore, corruption is a fight that we must fight, and it's a fight that we must win. End of quote. Again, in his inaugural speech in May 2018, His Excellency the President launched the war against corruption as one of the 3 democratic wars of his new direction government to change and transform Sierra Leone. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in all these statements, His Excellency the President has made it abundantly clear that the fight against corruption is an individual fight, it's a collective fight, it's a societal fight, it's a community fight, it's a national fight, it's a political fight, it's a psychological fight, and it's an attitudinal fight, and it is a fight that we must win. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we all know that the commissions of inquiry are operating in full steam with the shocking revelations of rampant corruption and abuse of state power and resources. The Anti-Corruption Commission has had 100% prosecution rate in the past 12 months, so we commend them highly for that. And thanks to the impressive leadership and determined leadership of the ACC Commissioner, for the first time in the history of Sierra Leone, some people in Sierra Leone today are now disowning ownership of mansions and hotel buildings. And Sierra Leone today is no longer regarded as the most corrupt country in the world. So, Your Excellency, Sierra Leone today is reclaiming its international respectability and is standing in the global community of civilized, democratically governed, and accountable states. This is good for the people of Sierra Leone. This is good for Sierra Leone as a country. And I am very proud as a Sierra Leonean, like the ACC Commissioner, I am very proud to be a Sierra Leonean because of the fight against corruption. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the fight against corruption is not an easy thing. 15 months in government, I know the temptations, I know the hassles, I know the emotional and moral blackmail of corruption. But it is a fight that we must fight, and it is the fight that we must win, as the President has said. So it is against this background that we are gathered here this morning to launch the National Anti-Corruption Strategy 2019-2023 as the fourth generation of national strategies developed in the fight against corruption since the establishment of the Anti-Corruption Commission in 2000. The 2019-2023 national strategy, like the three national anti-corruption strategies that preceded it, is aimed at attaining the vision of confronting corruption as a threat to every aspect of national development, and is aimed at building an ethical and accountable country that promotes zero tolerance for corruption and to inspire integrity, transparency, accountability, and the rule of law. Therefore, this strategy builds on the achievements and lessons learned during the implementation of the previous national anti-corruption strategies. I'm made to understand from the leadership of the ACC that a major strength of this new national anti-corruption strategy is that it is aligned with the medium-term national development plan of the new direction government, making this strategy an integral part of the annual activity plans of public sector institutions, including ministries, departments, agencies, as well as the private sector. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am reliably informed that this new strategic plan is based on three fundamental pillars. That is enforcement, prevention, and education. And at the center of this strategy is enforcement. Because any successful fight against corruption must start with practical enforcement actions on major targets. So if you disown your mansion and hotel because of fear of prosecution, then the government, through the ACC, must take enforcement action. This demonstrates to the public that the government is serious and determined to fight corruption at all levels. It also demonstrates the effectiveness of the anti-corruption agencies like the ACC, the Audit Service, the Judiciary, the Police, and Financial Intelligence Unit. So without these enforcement actions, the public will be reluctant to come forward to report corruption. Your Excellency, the National Anti-Corruption Strategy belongs to everyone and is for everyone in Sierra Leone. It is a very loud and powerful call to all Sierra Leoneans to change how we run the affairs of the state. This is a solid foundation to reduce corruption in our society today and to lay the foundation for good governance, sustainable development, and the fight against corruption. The national strategy is the product of extensive consultations among all relevant stakeholders and the diligent work of the technical team for producing the national strategy document. So please do join me to thank the technical team for their excellent work in producing this document. I have said in some of my statements that this will be the last commission of inquiry in Sierra Leone. So it is our responsibility as the new direction government to hold ourselves accountable to ensure that we do not have any other commissions of inquiry. It depends on how we conduct ourselves in governance in the next 10, 20, and 50 years. So today is a brand new day to consolidate the fight against corruption. And I have no doubt that our development partners will join us to win the fight against corruption in Sierra Leone today. I thank you.
Existing protocol, which I'm going to do exactly. It is a great honor for me to represent our constituents today at this important ceremony, the launching of the 4th generation of National Anti-Corruption Strategy for 2019-2023. We at the voluntary sector believe that the involvement of civil society is an integral part of any successful fight against corruption. In non-governmental organizations like ours, we regard the mobilization of civil society as a key to achieving success. It is our philosophy, however, that dealing with this overwhelming problem of corruption, the best position for civil society is within a broader coalition consisting of 3 key pillars. 1, government. 2, the private sector. 3, civil society. All 3 partners have to be involved in the fight against corruption to be credible as well as effective and sustainable. Mr. Chairman, Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, ladies and gentlemen, corruption has significant implications in each of these 3 dimensions. It does not respect boundaries. It is perhaps impossible to eliminate corruption entirely. But we should all strive to make steady progress towards that goal. We can begin by putting in place the right framework and institution for deterring and controlling corruption by strengthening the rule of law and democratic institutions to ensure that accountability, by fostering culture of zero tolerance, and also by encouraging the participation of all elements of society, including government, civil society, the media, and the private sector. And the private sector, in the effort of combating corruption. The strength of civil society can have a positive influence on the state and the market. Civil society organizations are therefore seen as an increasingly important mediator for promoting good governance, like transparency, effectiveness, openness, responsiveness, accountability. Civil society groups help further and improve good governance through its policy analysis and advocacy. From the foregoing, it could be argued that civil society groups in Sierra Leone are critical in the fight against corruption for good governance to strive. We are better positioned in democracy to fight for effective management of public resources and against abuse of office. We have helped to expose and condemn corrupt practices, Yes, in 2017 January, I was arrested and my passport was seized for 45 days for exposing corruption in one of the buildings occupied at Tower Hill. We have helped to expose corruption and assist in passing some anti-corruption legislation and protest against public policies considered destructive to public interest. Combating corruption requires far-reaching shift in political culture in order to instill the precept that corruption will not be tolerated. For the government to succeed in fighting corruption, it needs to introduce an effective and strong punitive system that is independent and has strong commitment from the political leaders. To fight corruption effectively, the judiciary needs to be effective, independent, and to be fair. We want to encourage the Anti-Corruption Commission to continue to stand firm in this fight and assure them of our steady support at all times. The sad thing this morning is that looking at the high table, we're having a problem of inclusiveness. We're having few women, sorry, I can forward from there. We want to thank the ACC and the technical expert team for producing this brilliant working document for the fight against corruption. I thank you.
It is now my pleasure to invite the man of the moment, the Anti-Corruption Commissioner, Mr. Ben Kaifala, to make a brief statement.
Permit me to stand on the existing protocol. Today is a very important milestone in the history of our country where we are launching the 4th generation anti-corruption strategy. A strategy that is supposed to lead us into an era that should be genuinely prosperous. If we are all committed to achieving the ethos that is contained in the strategy and to pursue it as a country honestly without any allegiances to the things that have held us back, whether it is political party, whether it is tribe, whether it's region, or whether even it is friendship. We have to break the chains. Our country has gained independence and has been in existence for quite a long time now. This is an era where we should not be worrying about basic things anymore like water, food supply, electricity, good roads, and things like that. We should be worrying about major things like nuclear energy. We should be worrying about what position our universities occupy in ladders that are respected. Is that we have to make the fight against corruption the pillar upon which this country should be transformed. And he has shown enormous presidential will in that regard. He has given us the support to achieve our mandate. And when I say the president, that includes the vice presidency, it includes the team he's working with. The ministers, heads of parastatals, people who are working in departments have all recognized the vision of the president, which we have been put in charge to lead. We knew that coming in at that time, there was a need for there to be a strategy that captures this vision, this transformative vision. And that vision was supposed to be couched into the new strategy that would come in force because the one that was inherited was about to end. In that regard, we also agreed, looking at the previous strategies, that they were done by consultants. Consultants who were more commercial, were more engaged in finishing the task and being paid. I called together the directors and we sat down and discussed this and said, no, we cannot continue this way. We have to put the responsibility to develop a strategy for Sierra Leone in the hands of Sierra Leoneans first of all. Then secondly, they have to do it selflessly. And that is why we identified people in society who, by their actions over the years, have shown a commitment to transparency, to nation building, a dedication to see it transform Sierra Leone, and we pull them together by notifying them that we wish them to be on part of the committee of experts that are to develop the anti-corruption strategy. And ladies and gentlemen, what you see here today, as was presented by one of the experts, Mr. Mara, is a product of that effort put in by 100% Sierra Leoneans to produce a 100% nationally owned and developed anti-corruption strategy. Let us put our hands together. May you kindly stand up, all of you who put your effort into this. These are not because of what we will pay. All we did was to provide stipend and resources for you to carry out your consultations and to put this together. And they did. They visited the length and breadth of Sierra Leone. They consulted with all stakeholders, from the president to the unionists, to people who are everywhere, to have their views about corruption, to enlist them in the fight for us to be able to achieve this. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an era that we have to embrace. There is the presidential will. We are still gauging the political will, but I believe in my heart that there is a political will. And we at the Anti-Corruption Commission are ready, willing, and dedicated to take on this fight and to push it. And that is why when the strategy was developed and was presented to us, we at the ACC told them that yes, prevention is good, public education is good, but at the heart of a good anti-corruption campaign, particularly in this stage of our history, is enforcement. Enforcement has to be the center of the fight against corruption, and that is why enforcing the laws of Sierra Leone, which are, by the way, regarded as one of the strongest in the world, not just in Africa, we have to enforce our laws. If we enforce our laws conscientiously, with the cooperation of the government, with the cooperation of the people of Sierra Leone, we can be able to continue to see a transformative drive for the people of Sierra Leone. There can be nothing achieved in Sierra Leone if we don't tackle the menace of corruption head on. And the only way to tackle the menace of corruption head on is to enforce. Therefore, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the very hard-working team at the Anti-Corruption Commission, who gave their all to achieve this, from the Directorate of NACS, led by Mr. Nabila Musa Kamara, who is here, to Madam Edita Fofana, who is the Deputy Director, and all the team at the NACS Secretariat, and also the Directorate and staff of the Anti-Corruption Commission. We are indebted to all of you for the support we have received in this effort. May I not conclude without recognizing the effort of Mr. Shirley Davis, our outgone Deputy Commissioner, who also put in conscientious effort in achieving this strategy. We thank you, Mr. Shirley Davis. You are no longer with us, but I can assure you that what we all agreed, sitting in that little office at the ACC, to take on the fight against corruption strongly, is going to be done. God being our helper, the President being with us, and the people standing by us. I thank you all.
Today we are at a crossroad. His Excellency, the President, has made the fight against corruption the centerpiece for the change and transformation of this country. It's a generational mandate. It's a generational mission. We'll either fulfill it or betray it. So with His Excellency, the President, with His Excellency, the Vice President, with the Firebrand Commissioner, and our dynamic ministers and deputy ministers, and we throw in the Chief Minister, we will fulfill that mission. So it is my distinct pleasure, the moment that we have been waiting for, the launch of the National Anti-Corruption Commission Strategy 2019-2023 by the Right Honorable Vice President, Dr. Mohamed Juldeh Jalloh. Please put your hands together.
Thank you very much. Kindly sit down. Mr. Chairman, before I deliver the keynote address and also launch the strategy I want to ask for 2 minutes to make a point in response to the statement delivered by the President of SLAG with regards to shadow state. You see, normally we don't have the luxury to meet this kind of gathering. When he said that the shadow state is well entrenched today, I want to disagree. The book he was mentioning was published in 1995 by William Leone. 24 years on, Africa has moved on. The shadow state was essentially about the decay of state institutions. And what we have seen over the years, in the last 24 years in Africa, there has been a reconstruction of state institutions. There has been a reconstitution of the civic space. So today, we have moved on from the shadow state to a weak state. I can agree if you say we are confronted with the problematic challenges of weak state in Africa today, which is about weak state institutions. The day after that book, in 1995, William Leone published another book, Warlord Politics and the African State. Those are the days when great political scientists in France like Jean-François Bayard published the criminalization of the African state. But 24 years on, Africa has moved on. Today, if we talk about anti-corruption commission, if we talk about a vibrant civil society, it's because we have moved on 24 years back to rebuilding the African state. So the shadow state, which constitutes the absolute decay of state institutions, is virtually fading away. But I am not going to bore you with that debate. My office is open. You can invite me anytime to challenge that theory. Because as young researchers, African researchers also working in Europe, we have done a lot. We have published a lot in that regard to showcase some of the effort we have made as African states. And today, make no mistake, even the complex dynamics of the international community does not allow for the existence of shadow state, because international, global changes are forcing the African state to go democratic, to go institutional, and to respond to international performance benchmark. So we have moved on. But like I said, my office is open. Let's have that debate. Mr. Chairman, moving on from that intellectual debate, we come to business proper. I want to thank you very much and want to say gladly that today we are all gathered here to witness what the Commissioner himself called a milestone in the government's determination to fight the scourge of corruption. There's no doubt, in the last 58 years since we gained independence, this country's development trajectory has been marred by corruption. It has not only crippled our efforts to move this country forward, but continue to constitute a major handicap. One critical step to enable us to put this country on a right footing for sustainable development is to eliminate corruption. Like I just said, over the years, Africa has moved on. African countries have identified basically two broad approaches to fighting corruption. We have what they call the process approach. That is when you establish ad hoc institutions like the ACC to fight corruption. We also have what we call the structural approach. That is when you undertake wide-ranging state reforms to rebuild your institutions, make the public sector competitive, encourage transparency in the private sector as well. What is unique about the ACC strategy over the years is that, particularly this new strategy, we have opted to combine the process approach with a little element of the structural approach. What does that mean? It means we are gradually not only focusing essentially on enforcement, but the ACC also involves in wide-range reforms. I will come to that. But the beauty of combining these two approaches lies essentially in the fact that you create space for civil society, you create space for government, you create space for public sector reforms. Because at the end of the day, like the Chief Minister said, we want to see the end of commissions of inquiry. But equally so, we want to see the end of ad hoc approaches. Because when you engage in critical structural reforms, when you build a viable public sector capable of delivering services, then gradually you see that the process approach, which is an ad hoc institution to look after people, then will come to pass. So like I said, one beautiful thing about this strategy is the fact that certain aspects of the structural process is taken into consideration. In other parts of Africa, you either have one of the two. Either you have a commission that goes essentially for enforcement, or you have a body that is set up to embark on wide-ranging state reforms. But here we decided to combine the two. And I want to thank the Commissioner very well for that very beautiful combination. Since the end of the establishment, since this establishment of the Anti-Corruption Commission in 2000, successive governments have implemented 3 national anti-corruption strategies. The new direction government also designed this one, which we are here to launch. That is the 4th generation national anti-corruption strategy 2019-2023. The strategy will guide government fight against corruption in the next couple of years, and while I'll also use the occasion to call on all of us, all MDAs, including private sector actors, to support this government determination to wage a war on corruption. Let me state here categorically that this is a fight, like successive speakers before me have clearly articulated, we must win. It doesn't matter the states that are involved, we will fight corruption in the interest of this country until we are reasonably convinced that it no longer poses a threat to the existence of the very state. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, there is no gainsaying that in the first 16 months of the new direction government, we have single-handedly achieved a lot in the fight against corruption and the recovery of looted funds. In the last 16 months, the ACC, through the dynamic efforts of its leadership, have recovered 17,621,824,510 euros, amounting to $2 million. Equally important is the fact that there has been a 100% increase in corruption reports. Interestingly, the conviction rate of corruption cases has also increased. Using what I just described as the structural approach, diagnostic and systems review of government ministries, departments, and agencies have been conducted, allowing for systematic identification of loopholes of corruption in these MDAs, thus paving the way for thorough institutional reforms. Going forward, this strategy is aimed at tracking corruption as a threat to national development, while at the same time help support government effort to promote zero tolerance for corruption, inspire integrity and adherence to the rule of law. The strategy calls for certain new methods in the way we run the affairs of the state, particularly with a view to controlling corruption and strengthening the pillars of good governance, meeting the goals in both the National Development Plan and the UNDGs, that is the Sustainable Development Goals. This will only be made possible, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, if we reduce corruption levels to the barest minimum. For instance, Cluster 4 in the National Development Plan states that, I quote, corruption and illegal financial flows have been some of the most persistent challenges facing successive governments, posing a significant threat to socio-economic growth, development, and stability. Abundant evidence shows that fighting corruption and illicit financial flows at all levels is crucial for alleviating extreme poverty and boosting private sector growth and development. The lesser the incidence of corruption in a country, the greater the likelihood of steady economic growth as investor confidence will increase significantly, unquote. In the same vein, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the Sustainable Development Goal 16.5 recommends that we substantially reduce corruption and bribery in all its forms as a means to so many ends. It is evident that the country has made substantial progress with the introduction and implementation of various anti-corruption measures. We know that challenges still remains. The implementation of this strategy must therefore be viewed as an entry point to overcome some of these challenges in tackling corruption through, like the ACC Commissioner clearly outlined, prevention, education, and enforcement, not only in the public sector, but also in the private sector. It is for this singular reason that the Integrity Management Committees established in all MDAs should be made functional and responsive to the issues outlined in the National Anti-Corruption Strategy Implementation Action Plan. In that regard, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as a government, we want to urge all MDAs to develop institutional anti-corruption measures that are in line with the strategy and to ensure that these measures are in compliance with those actions that are clearly stated and clearly delineated in the action plan. As a government, what we can do is to continue to push for adequate budgetary allocation to ensure the functionality of all integrity management committees. Like I just said, while making reference to institutional decay that has been confronting African states over the last 3 decades, corruption thrives where institutions and frameworks are very weak. This government recognizes that on the global stage, developing countries are still challenged with containing and controlling corruption. Recent corruption perception indices indicate that more than 2/3 of countries score below 50 on this year's CPI, with an average score of just 43. While there are exemptions, the data clearly shows today that despite some progress, most countries are failing to make serious inroads in the fight against corruption. Nevertheless, we want to change the narrative in Sierra Leone, which explains the underlying strategic relevance of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy. The days of hard up and lip service approach to fighting corruption, those days are over. As a government and a nation, we must draw the line. We must make hard choices, and therefore enforcement of the laws against corruption must take the center stage. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you will agree with me that today, the discernible result in terms of corruption conviction, particularly corruption conviction, strengthening integrity and ethical standards, particularly in the public sector, is vital in this drive. As we continue to strive hard to meet international performance benchmarks, to promote accountability, transparency in public financial management, service delivery, and in the mining sector, as a country, we cannot afford to lose focus in the fight against corruption. Make no mistake that today we have the exemplary political will. I will just encourage the ACC to tap into that political will. As we today, ladies and gentlemen, here, like the Commissioner said, on an historic day to launch the government's first national anti-corruption strategy, we again, as a government and as a people, commit to the citizens of this country and our development partners that we take the fight against corruption seriously. And this strategy is one critical, vital step in that direction. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is in that optimism to fight corruption in this country and to lay the basis, the institutional basis and framework that are clearly outlined in this framework, that I want you together with me as a country to launch the fourth national anti-corruption strategy as well as the implementation action plan. I thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
As una don listen to wetin different speakers wey talk during the launching, and also una don listen to wetin the Vice President, His Excellency Dr. Mohamed Juldeh Jalloh, as e be dey launch the National Anti-Corruption Strategy for 2019 to 2023. Me wey carry this program to una today, me your name na Aissatou Smile Sise. So this program go meet una again. I say tata.